Never ask AI about your future. Many of you may know about the ongoing blow-up of artificial intelligence, better known as AI. People usually only tend to use it to mess around, generate art, or even to do their homework for them. I am definitely guilty of the latter one. However, little did I know that it can do so much more than anyone would believe. My name is Ethan, and I live with my girlfriend, Ava, in a home in a small town called Dickinson up in North Dakota. We live relatively happy lives together and have well-paying jobs, other than the long hours that we work. But we need to have a way to pay for our bills, insurance, etc. Normally, we get home from work around the same time, but today I got off a few hours before Ava. And so, I had some free time to kill. I had the fun idea that I could mess around with some AI for a bit, since it was exciting and all. For your reference, I use the popular artificial intelligence ChatGPT app on my phone whenever I decide to use AI. I wanted to test its boundaries and see what it could do. So, I decided to ask the AI one simple question: what will happen in my future? Now, normally when you ask an AI a question like what will happen in my future, you'll get a very simple answer like, I'm sorry, I cannot predict the future, or I'm not capable of that. Well, that is exactly the type of answer I got. At least until I tried again, and on my third attempt, it gave me an answer. You will go to the grocery store today. I was utterly shocked and kind of confused, like anyone would be. Why would it actually give me an answer? I was just messing around. And why would I be going to the grocery store today? My girlfriend and I both go to the grocery store on Saturdays. It's always been like that ever since we moved in together around 2 years ago. I don't go to the store for any other reason, and so I disregarded the AI's comment. Thought it was some kind of glitch, or maybe an AI coder messing with me. I wasn't sure what to do, so I curiously asked the same question again. And to my surprise, it once again responded with another answer. You will receive a phone call today. I truly thought that the AI was messing with me until a minute or so later, my phone buzzed. It was a call, and it was from Ava. This had to be a coincidence, because there is no way artificial intelligence can actually somehow see into my future. Although I was freaked out, I answered my phone. Ethan, hello? Ava, hey Ethan, I'm going to be working a little later tonight. Do you mind going to the grocery store to pick up a gift and a card for my mom's birthday tomorrow? The store will be closed by the time I get off, so I won't be able to make it while I'm off. Ethan, is this some kind of a joke? Ava, what do you mean? It had to be a joke, or some kind of a prank. Because otherwise, there was no way to explain this. The AI just predicted that I would receive a call, and that I would go to the grocery store. Maybe this was all just some huge coincidence, or maybe the AI I had used was just bugged. That's what I wanted to believe, anyway. Ava, hello? Ethan, you there? Ethan, why yeah, sure. I can do that. Ava, okay, thank you. Make sure to get her something nice, okay? Ethan, I will, don't worry. We talked on the phone for a couple of minutes until we hung up. I decided not to tell her about what the AI had told me just moments before she called me. I knew she wouldn't believe me. She'd probably think that I was just messing with her, the way I thought that she was just messing with me. I grabbed my keys and headed to my car and drove to the grocery store, the one Ava and I always go to. I made my way to the birthday card section and was picking out one of the cards. I couldn't focus and found myself in an endless loop of thinking about what that AI had said. I had to test it out to prove to myself that this was not real and everything that had happened was pure coincidence. And so, I used my phone and asked the AI, what will happen in my future? It didn't answer. Not like the typical sorry, can't do that answer, it actually just didn't say anything at all. I wasn't sure if I was happy or even more concerned. While I was thinking about this, I noticed that there was an older man who was dressed in all black, standing about 10 feet to my left. He seemed to be looking for a card, just like I was, but in my peripheral vision, the man seemed to be looking right at me. His fierce gaze burned into my soul, unlike any other. I wanted to turn to confront the person staring at me. I was almost too scared to turn fully at the man, frozen in time. And just as I was about to turn and face the stranger, I noticed on my phone that the AI had answered my previous question. "You will be followed." This sentence made my heart sink into my shoes. I was too scared to move. I've never really frozen up like this and could not feel my legs. In my peripherals it almost seemed as if the man was getting closer to me. He was now about 5 feet away. I don't know why I wasn't able to move. It felt as if I was under some kind of spell cast by some witch or wizard. I was sure I was going to die right then and there. Until suddenly, I was abruptly startled by a woman who tapped my right shoulder and asked me in a kind voice, "Grocery clerk, are you finding everything okay?" "Ethan, why yes, I am." Satisfied with my answer, the woman walked away. Being startled by this woman allowed me to move again and almost made me forget about the man who was keeping me under this hypnotic state. I quickly turned to my left, expecting to meet the man's gaze, but was met with nothing. The man had somehow vanished. I thought I was just seeing things, but that didn't explain my inability to move. I couldn't explain the events that had just transpired, nor how the AI could predict such events. I didn't want to ask the AI that question ever again, but it seemed like I didn't have a choice. I looked at my phone, and sure enough, just as I thought this, the AI wrote me an answer to the question I'd been asking it, but this time, I never actually asked it. The AI said, "Your girlfriend will go missing." Now I'd seen enough with the AI to know that it wasn't messing around. I quickly called Ava, and to my horror, she didn't answer. She always answered my phone when I called her, no matter what she was doing. I actually don't remember the last time she didn't pick up. So, I began to freak out. I ran to my car, not even caring about purchasing a birthday gift for Ava's mother. I put the keys in the ignition and floored it to our house. By this time, Ava would be almost home. However, she said that she'd be working late, so I have no idea how much longer it will be till she's here. I just hope that she's okay. It's been about 2 hours since I made it back home from the grocery store, and Ava has yet to answer any of my calls. I want to believe that her phone is just out of battery, but I feel that this is not the case. I even tried to contact her mother, but to no avail. I'm beginning to panic and am not sure what to do. Maybe I should call the police? Maybe I should go out looking for her? Or maybe I should. I noticed my phone, which has a new notification from the AI, a new answer to a question I never asked. "You will die tonight." I didn't even have time to react to this, because as soon as I read it, my home was filled with the sound of a doorbell. I got up with relief, thinking my girlfriend finally made it home from her eternally long shift. As I was getting up, the one doorbell ring turned into 2, and then 3, and then a repetitive sound that kept on continuing. I did not know why my girlfriend would ring the doorbell so many times. As a matter of fact, why would she be ringing the doorbell to her own home? I was about 15 feet from the door when the ringing turned into violent banging sounds on the door's wood. I got to the door and looked through the peephole. I was horrified. I could easily tell that the person outside my home was the same person that was at the store with me just hours ago. They were wearing the same dark clothes from earlier and stared at the door with the same menacing gaze that I felt from before. Although I was scared that the man followed me to my home, what scared me the most was his face. His face shook to my very core. He had pale, almost gray skin with pitch black eyes that seemed to have no soul. He had a terrible smile on his face, stretching from ear to ear with what seemed to be water dripping from his grin. He chuckled, and I jumped back in fear and yelled, "Who are you, and where's Ava?" The banging on the door stopped, and the home fell silent. There was no response from that thing that stood outside the door. In this moment of terror, my heart sank after I remembered that I did not lock the door out of habit, since Ava usually arrives home shortly after I get home. If this thing decided to try the doorknob, then I was as good as dead. I slowly stepped towards the door, making sure not to creak the floorboards that stood in my path. I took a few steps and the worst happened. The floor creaked, and that thing began its banging on the door once more. I rushed towards the door handle to twist the lock, but it was too late. The thing was already ahead of me and began opening the door. As the door began to open, I shoved my shoulder into the door to keep it closed. However, whatever this thing was, it was inhumanly strong. It pushed as hard as it could and almost hit its grimace hands through the door frame. With the help of fear and adrenaline, I managed to close the door, just enough to lock it. This thing began to bang on the door even harder than before, and it screamed with a hellish laugh. I was shivering in fear as I have never heard anything scream in such a way. I ran to my bedroom and began crying the most tears I had ever cried in my life. I didn't understand what was happening and why it was happening to me. I thought of my girlfriend who I wanted to make my wife. I wished that I could just wake up and realize that this was all some sick nightmare. However, I knew that this wasn't the case. The banging has gotten much louder, and the door sounds like it is about to give way under that thing's sheer force. Its laugh has also gotten louder, and it almost seems like it knows that it is going to get in, and I believe it will, but I'm not going down without a fight. I am writing this experience down in hopes that people will learn from my experience. I have a bat in hand and will try my best to fight back against this thing. Please, if you are reading this, take my advice when I say, never ask AI about your future. "7 months ago was a nightmarish scene that plagued the lives of many here. In a single night, different and unique horror encounters were concluded to their unfortunate endings. Those horror tales, they all came from uniquely different individuals from all across the map. And they all ended together in one moment that deadly night. The night of July 7th is perfect setting for a horror show. An unusual storm had been showering Jonestown for a week, and the night of the 7th is the storm's angriest. The storm seemed to shower an ocean's worth of rain, and the winds are violently swaying the entire forest in all directions. And underneath the darkness of night and within the chaos of the storm is where those stories ended. All the stories, I have gathered them from the people who refused or are unable to tell their horrifying tales. And after months of hard work, today, I have finally acquired them all. Finding these individuals and managing to acquire their stories cost me a lot of money, time, research, and skills, but I thrived. Now, all the horrors that happened that night will finally be revealed. It's time for me to share the stories, and let's begin with the first story that I've acquired. My journey began at my first expedition. You can call this the first episode since I'm revealing it in a story form. This is the first of many horrors to come. The first episode, Animal Snatcher. Jonestown is a large and populated area, a town that inhabits thousands of residents living their modern lives. Although the town is 80% modern structures, where I need to be is at the far southwest of the town. Instead of buildings and modern houses, the southwest edge of Jonestown is mostly flat lands and trees. A massive land for nature to grow itself unsupervised. Forests, lakes, flat lands, it was a breath of fresh air away from noise pollution and the crowd. A kind of place where our first storyteller resides, a place for his humble farm. It's 5 a.m. in the morning when my long drive had finished. After 7 hours of searching and asking about, I have found the farm that I was looking for. I've been driving for 4 hours with nothing but my car's AC to condition my body and when I stepped outside the car, the wind hit me and I immediately felt the countryside's natural atmosphere. The place is flat, green, enormous, and is blooming of plant life. The sun is rising and its light combined with the breeze of the fields give me the feel of nature's comfort. I thought I'd feel bliss as the breeze and morning light brushed through my skin, but instead I felt eerie and heavy. Maybe that feeling is from knowing that something horrible happened here, an encounter to discover that led me here in the first place. My research had led me here where our farmer had his strange story. According to some folks I spoke of, his farm had been attacked relentlessly for days, but there were no records from the police somehow. I wished to know more on what happened, and which better person to ask about it than the farmer himself. I went straight into the farm and followed a dirt road that leads to a big house. I'm looking forward to having a cup of morning coffee and a little chat about his incident 7 months ago. I'm willing to pay a huge amount of money if I had to. I knocked on the house's door multiple times, but no one were inside. I checked and peeked on every window until I finally concluded to myself that the house is empty or there's a very heavy sleeper inside. I decided to give up and check the one building left to see within this huge land, and in that building is where I found him. The farmer is at his barn, busy tinkering with his tractor engine. I approached the man cautiously. I didn't waste any second the moment he noticed my presence. I said my good morning and asked as directly and straightforward as I can, not hiding my intentions. As much as I wanted to take this interview as slow and tactful as I can, I'm unfortunately scheduled to interview and locate more storyteller. Unlike this farmer that's easy to find, the rest of them are either at the other edge of the town or hiding somewhere. Time is of the essence. I asked the farmer and brought out my recorder. This is the audio of our talk. Farm.mov. Well, good morning to you too, mister. Pleasure seeing a different face in this place. That's a fancy suit you're wearing. It doesn't belong here on my farm. What's your business? You've been sniffing around, huh? You're asking me about that story? 7 months ago? Yeah, the story is true. My farm were attacked back then. My animals were disappearing, getting stolen. Damn thief took advantage of the storm to mess with my quiet living. And the worst part, there's no evidence throughout those crimes too. A set of clean robbery. Yes, you're right. No trails, no footprints, no nothing. The storm had become that thief's accomplice. Even those city detectives couldn't make progress investigating because I have no evidence to share, only my word saying that I have less animal on my farm every morning. It was all the birds that were stolen. Ducks and chickens were disappearing like magic every night while I slept. I would wake up with the door to my bird coop busted open and one of the cages will have a couple or more of my birds missing. Yeah. That's true, you're right again. I had indeed decided to stop the thief from his stealing. I took it upon my own hands to take care of the thief since that the police wouldn't do what I wished them to. On July 2nd, the rain is waving the trees violently cause there was a crazy storm. I hid at my bird coop with my wooden bat, ready to swing with full force. It was cold and dark. But with weapon in hand, I waited for that damn thief. Gotta admit that I couraged myself up first with some beer. Just to get to the mindset of ambushing, you know. I was drunk that night. A drunk, pissed off, 47 years old, 6 feet 3 inches man with a baseball bat. I waited patiently in my barn like a gator, ready to snap its mouth to any perpetrator. The night is rainy and quiet, very quiet until the thief starts to make his move. Squeak. Squeak. It was the doorknob, the door handle being twisted, the keyhole being tampered with, being lockpicked. Whoever was outside, it's about to break in soon. The squeaking of the door woke me up like a splash of cold water and I immediately stood firm behind it. I readied my stance as he gently opened the door. My chickens started getting aggravated as the stranger crept nearby them with his heavy breathing. Their peaceful slumber was interrupted by an unknown thief. I slowly came out of my hiding spot and saw him slightly. The bastard is too busy opening one of the cage to notice me. That was my opportunity to sneak and strike. I jump at him and cab him. I hit him good. A good slam at his back. It was so strong that my wooden bat splits into two. I recoiled back from the force and the thief made a quick escape, retreating to the woods. I didn't bother chasing after him. Seeing the broken bat, I thought the message was sent. The message to not fuck with me. That was the last time my birds disappeared. He stopped and never came back. My plan worked. Yes, it's just one guy. You don't believe it's one guy? Well, up to you, buddy. I can't tell you things that didn't happen. I'm telling the truth. My mother didn't raise a liar. Sigh, look, I did the job and it was done, all right. What else do you want? That's the whole damn thing. One deranged criminal messed with me. I understand why. It's 'cause I'm all alone in this farm. An easy target to those who don't have something better to do. I might be a one-man army, but I took care of it. End of story. Now, unless you know anything about tractor engines, you can leave my property. Your pushy attitude is getting on my nerves. I said that's all of it. Stop bothering me or I'll call the cops on your ass. End of recording. The lone farmer didn't even bother to look at me throughout it all. He just kept his hand and eyes on his tractor as if he's talking to himself while telling me the summary of his story. But I know there's more to it than that. He's holding back so much more and I know it. I anticipated that he wouldn't cooperate immediately, but I know what to do for him to take me seriously. What I did next, I told him, and showed. It startled him. He made eye contact, and I can see the fear on his eyes, a traumatic recall. My words along with the picture is definitely not what he's expecting. His grumpy and distracted attitude changed. He immediately got up and invited me into his house, prioritizing me before his farm works. He had me sat down to his living room couch as he prepared the two of us coffee. His living room is a nicer place to converse than his barn earlier. As I sipped my coffee, he sat down at the opposite couch, let out a huge sigh, and braced himself. I braced myself too, braced to hear what really happened on his farm. I take my camera and hit record. This is the recording of our conversation. Farm 1.mov. Sigh. I don't know who you are, mister, and I'm not interested to find out. I'm just a farmer living his quiet life out here. I don't know what madness did my farm got mixed up to, and I don't want any more. You're really planning to? Well, I'm not going to help you with that, but the least I could do is to tell you the true story. It was a lot more brutal than what I cooked up to those nosy reporters. Here we go. Firstly, I never really were alone in here, not a one-man army at all. I always had homely company, Milo and Biscuit, my two companion dogs. I love them very much. They've been with me since they were a puppy, both from their mama Moxie that died here in the farm, buried at the back. Oh, I tell you, those two puppers kept my spirits alive throughout those days of being under attack. My daughter loved them both too, but when she died of cancer, they're the only family I had left. Now those first 3 days of attack, chickens and ducks started vanishing with the door to my bird coop lockpicked open. That had become my morning surprise. I would feel annoyed about it. I see my animals as a family member since I'm raised that way. To think that someone is stealing my precious birds and doing who knows what is both infuriating and scary. Whatever thief it was, it's clearly not some dumb animal getting some snacks. It was intelligent and it knew how to open locks. A strange thief that's not interested with the cash in my house, but instead the animals in my farm. No evidence meant no progress of knowing. The storm washed up all its traces pretty good. The third day of its theft, it stole a total of 3 birds, including my favorite duck I named Dick. It was the straw at the back of the camel. I had enough. The police couldn't make a move, so I decided to fight for my animals and be vigilant. I decided to ambush the thief myself. That night of the ambush, I had my bat and beer towards the bird coop and positioned myself. I lay in at my bird coop that 2nd of July. The lights all over my house were open and the TV is very loud, all to make it look like I'm in the house, you know. I waited patiently until 11 p.m. when weirdness started happening. First weird thing I saw was my dogs, Milo and Biscuit. They were standing towards the window, scratching the glass while barking like they're trying to get out. They both saw something and wanted to chase after it, and they were looking in my direction, at the bird coop. Squeak. Squeak. It was the doorknob, the door handle being twisted, the keyhole being tampered with, being lockpicked. Whoever was outside, it's about to break in soon. I control my breath and the beating of my heart in an attempt to stealth. The thief opens the door. It was a small boy with blonde hair, about 4 feet 10 inches. It were dark, so I can't really see much of him except of that. He's determined though, and is immediately heading towards a chicken cage. But before he could open a cage, I jump at him and cab him. I hit him on the back. It was so hard that it broke my wooden bat into 2. You may call that child abuse, I'll call it self-defense. I lost my balance as I recoiled from swinging my bat and dropped to the floor. The kid on the other hand did something that I still argue to myself to this day, whether or not it really happened or it's just my drunk brain. The kid got knocked back towards the muddy floor and he did something off. He started shaking his head left and right, up and down as if he's continuously nodding and disagreeing very violently and quickly. I thought I got him in the head and gave him seizures, but I'm certain it was his back that I hit. He then regained balance, but not just with his feet. He stood immediately with all his limbs like a dog. He started crawling unbelievably quickly outside the bird coop, moving like a super spider where all his limbs bends and stampedes quickly for his escape. I stood up and looked at the window, watched him crawl into the darkness behind the fence and deeper within the trees. He was so fast and it all happened in merely seconds. It's almost like he can race against my dogs crawling and he'd win for him to cross my land with such speed on all fours. I thought it was weird, but my focus got changed towards my birds. I felt relieved. Nothing will haunt them anymore. I've won, my ambush succeeded, and the boy never returned. I came back to my house and took a warm bath thinking that nothing will bother me anymore, or so I thought. That night, I slept with satisfaction. Now for the next part, I kept it a secret cause nobody believed me when I first shared. But knowing what you showed me earlier, that picture, I know you'll find my story very believable. Because the next 4 days, things had escalated from annoying to terrifying. AF day after that ambush against the thief, I was watching the TV the next stormy night, July the 3rd. I remember laughing very loud on a joke from that funny sitcom. I were watching something hilarious with popcorn and booze beside my couch, my kind of perfect night. I feel happy and safe knowing that my bird coop won't be tampered with anymore. But then, amidst my loud laughter, a bizarre scream from the distance was picked up by my ears. My laughter were immediately replaced by terror and my smile turned into a frown the moment I realized what my ears just picked up out of nowhere, a weird indistinguishable scream from outside. Shivers ran all over my body. I immediately stood and muted the television by instinct. My hearing sharpened and my heart pounded quickly as I sharply stared at the direction of the scream. I stood there frozen, blankly staring with anticipation to hear any follow-up sounds or maybe a busting through my doors or windows, but there was only the sound of rain left. It's just one scream and nothing to follow. That scream wasn't loud, but loud enough to be heard slightly from this living room. It sounded like a whispered scream hearing it here. The fact that it managed to be heard despite the storm, the walls, and the distance is bizarre enough. The worst part, it didn't sound like human, nor any animal. Bark. 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 I nearly jumped when they started barking. Milo and Biscuit's delayed and aggressive barks confirmed it, that it wasn't my imagination. They heard it too and was aggravated. Too scared to bark right away until courage finally builds up within them. I peeked on the window to scout a look. The bird coop can be viewed from here, but I saw it was untouched. It didn't seem like someone broke in. Unlike the past nights, I spent half an hour trying to keep an eye out to the outside. I observed the bird coop until drowsiness overtook the fear. I decided to sleep for the night and brushed it off as just something weird. There is no way I'm investigating, in the middle of a stormy night, on where and what is the source of that scream. I just took my hunting rifle beside my bed that night, the gun that I never used nor wished that a day would come that I will require to use it. Milo and Biscuit had to sleep in my room too. We all felt uneasy and needed each other to feel safe. It's probably nothing, I tell myself as I slowly fade into sleep. The next morning, I woke up with slight rain a day. Milo and Biscuit were usually excited for the morning rain. They were playful on the mud puddles like children enjoying the simplicity. But this morning was different. They didn't leave the house nor my room. Their behavior honestly weirded me out. I tried dragging Milo out, but he would whimper and crawl back to the room with Biscuit. Fine. I'll work by myself, I muttered to my dogs. I headed outside and started the day grumpy yet cautious. Their behavior reminded me to be sharp. I investigated the farm with caution, thinking that whatever it was that screamed, it might still be around. My searching didn't last long. I held my hunting rifle and looked inside one of my barns. I smelled something strong, and inside of it was a horrifying surprise. One of my precious animals were killed. Not just stolen, but this time, killed. It wasn't from my bird coop too, not just a small bird this time. It was one of my barn pigs, the biggest pig in here, I named Cobble. I entered the barn and found Cobble nailed into the wall of my barn like a painting. All hands and feet were stretched and broken, each limbs are nailed to the wall forming an upside-down X-shaped pig corpse. His face is pointing to the floor with belly against the wall. His midsection was massacred, it was skinned off, exposing his rib cage and insides. Some of Cobble's guts nearly fell off the ground after being exposed upside down all night. A gory display of one of my beloved animals. I couldn't help but vomit my breakfast at the sight. What the fuck? I shouted as I wiped my mouth off a bile. I desperately ran outside the barn to get air. The smell of fresh open carcass was not good to my stomach. I looked around for breakage, inspected the fences, I had some footprints, but I found nothing. The rain washed off all the possible prints before it could give me some clue. Any clue on how this happened to Cobble? I decided to run back to the house and call the police immediately, but I had no response behind the phone, just static and a long beep. Out of all the times to be offline, they chose this day when things got dangerous and critical. Instead of waiting for a response, I went back to the corpse with a thick mask and cleaned up the scene that was my precious Cobble. I scratched my head in confusion and disgust as I mopped the pool of blood and guts. What the hell happened to you, Cobble? Was it that boy again? I thought I got him. Did he really run off on fours like a monkey that night? I was drunk and might have misremembered. Did he also make that scream? Or was this all from something new? Arg. Fuck all of these. All these questions kept running on my mind as I buried what remains of Cobble. It was a lot of work. This is the worst morning of my life is the only confirmed thought on my mind. The day had passed and I spent half of it cleaning up the gruesome murder. I wanted to visit the police myself, but I need to tend on my farm. I can't spare 4 hours of travel and leave the farm. The night approached and a lot has been done. I was so busy and it got dark without me noticing. That night in my bed, I was about to close my eyes to sleep off my fatigue. But again from the outside, I were disturbed by that horrifying scream. A little bit louder this time, a little bit closer. I jumped and froze and saw Milo and Biscuit below the bed. They didn't bark anymore, they just whimpered as they tucked themselves in a corner. My exhausted body couldn't be bothered. I fell asleep shortly after. Whatever that thing is, it didn't stop after one pig. It just gave me a taste of what's about to come. The horror show has begun and my farm is the stage, my animals were the victim. The next morning was my cow Shayna that were killed. Her body was skinned and she was hanged to the neck by a tight rope as if she committed suicide. Her intestines fell off the floor from being hanged and having no skin to cover her innards. The horrible sight made me vomit yet again. I fear on how the thing is committing such violence on high a degree. I called the police for the third time but was greeted by static yet again. There's something wrong going on. Déjà vu? It's like yesterday had repeated itself. The fact that I'm disposing a cow instead of a pig this time confirmed that I'm actually experiencing this twice. I sleep early out of fatigue, but my slumber were interrupted by a scream yet again. The third morning of attack is another mess. It was 2 pigs. Chert and Chandel from different barns. All their limbs are torn off, 2 pairs of arms and legs were missing. And their limbless bodies were clawed with a hook by their jaw at the ceiling like a caught fish. Their torn off limbs made them bleed to death. This killer loves to hang my animals and leave them to die slowly, either bleeding or with guts exposed. Cleaning the remains took me almost half a day and I nearly got nothing done afterwards. My body tires out from mopping out blood and burying pig carcass. My mind tires out as well from the stress and gore that I had to endure. This is all just a nightmare, right? The night occurred quickly. I came back home with Milo and Biscuit acting very scared in my room, anticipating the scream. I slept at the sofa but can still hear the whimpering of my poor puppers upstairs. Sure enough, the scream that they'd been fearing for happened and it made my dogs whimper louder. Then the next morning, 7th of July, was 3 cows killed. Sure shoe, shopping, and check. They were all nailed into the wall forming a display of X-shaped massacre scene like a cobble but in different orientations. Sure shoe is facing the ceiling with belly against the wall, shopping is upside down facing the floor with his back against the wall, and Shelby is nailed facing the ceiling with belly exposed. All of them had their ribcage open like a cabinet, exposing their lungs and making them bleed to death. For days of massacre and my farm nearly emptied, it was torture. Hours of my morning became a disposal of gore from the killer's mess. My nights were then haunted with indistinguishable screams afar that gave me nightmares and terrorized my poor dogs. The craziness was all too much and the help was out of reach. I had enough. I thought about heading to the station, but it was a long drive. I thought about moving out, but my father didn't raise a quitter. I made up my mind. No more losing my livestock and sleeping in fear. I decided that I need to ambush again. That stormy night of the ambush is July 7th, 7 months ago. I didn't bother cleaning up the 3 dead cows that's nailed to the wall. I instead used my day to gather the remaining animals in one barn. This is my trap for the intruder, a part of my plan. I lay on top of the barn, ready to strike. Again, I'm half drunk but armed with a rifle and dynamites this time, ready for round 2. Yes, a rifle and dynamites. I was drunk and fucked up. After all the carnage that happened, I figured that a bat wouldn't cut it anymore. Bringing a bat to a massacre might get me killed. Even though I have never shot a living being with a gun throughout my life, that night I'm determined, decisive, and drunk. The stormy night went on and the killer hadn't come by. No screams, no deaths. The barn is quiet. I thought that maybe the killer knew about the lunatic waiting for it, or the strong storm made it back out of its normal killing. Waiting for the bastard nearly made me fall asleep. Nearly. I slowly drift into sleep as my mind slowly prioritized my fatigue more than the ambush. My descent to a dream were interrupted by weird noises. It was sounds from my animals below. They were noisy and panicking. Loud moos and oinks from below fired up my nerves and made me peek. Below I saw it fresh. A recent crime. One cow had its body crushed. My cow's torso is squished. Muscle and flesh are popping out of its skin as if a gigantic hand had grabbed it and squished it tight, or something enormous gave it a hug to death. Blood gushes out of its nearly exploded face, and its guts and flesh were being trampled over by other animals that were panicking. The stampede of scared animals below was so loud. Stop! 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 I yelled, suffering the noise of panicking animals. I couldn't take it. I ran outside to avoid the horror of chaos and let the storm's rain comfort my ears. My panic slowly dissolves as the sound of rain and thunder muffled the stampede within the barn. Amidst of my panicking, I noticed something outside. A huge pool of blood leading somewhere, a fresh trail of blood that hasn't been wiped by the storm completely, my dead cow making a path towards the killer. It leads further out, over the fence. It made chills ran down my neck to see the only lead I got towards confronting the perpetrator. Under the influence of alcohol, I followed the trail of blood. It goes outside my plot, further into the woods. I followed it confidently. I am determined. It sounds crazy walking the woods alone under a stormy night, following blood. Normally I'd feel fear, but this time I didn't. Wielding a gun under the influence of beer can do magic to you. I'm ready for my first kill and I seek vengeance. As I follow the blood, out of nowhere, in the darkness of the forest, it screamed. It was very loud and clear towards a direction. My eyes followed the outworldish sound and I aimed my rifle at the source of it. My hand suddenly became shaky as I held the trigger with my finger, cowardly pointing at the scream. I wanted to see what it was, but it was too dark. All I could do was point my weapon on where it came from. My heart pounds quickly as my finger hooked the trigger. This is the gun that I never wanted to use ever in my life, not even for any animals. But somewhere in that direction is a monster that terrorized my life and massacred my farm. It all happened in seconds, all in my head. My heart quickly debated my mind telling me to run while I still have the distance. Or my 2 legs intact and not massacred. But my mind protests telling me to fight, reminding me of the horrors that I endured and how I wanted this to end. I made quick a decision of fight or flight. Bang! Bang! A loud noise disturbed the forest. I shoot at the direction twice. I think I successfully hit it. The monster immediately stampedes to the right after taking a bullet. I felt the adrenaline rush through me as I shoot my gun at something for the first time. The thing ran for its life and 2 bullets didn't seem enough. It's the first time I heard its footsteps too. The speed of its steps almost sounded like 2 horses somehow rushing in one space. It seemed big based on the sound of its stampede, probably twice the size of a moose. I didn't waste time. I got it good, but I need to finish it. I immediately ran after a bleeding creature. My senses sharpened as I gripped my gun tighter the moment I realized that the hunt is on. I chased after its footsteps, running through the heart of forest until I ran out of breath. It was so fast, very fast, and sooner, I lost following its stampede. It kept running on weird zigzag directions until I lost my ear on where it ran off. But I'm way too sharp that night, sharp enough to find a new trail to follow it. My senses saw more red blood from the bullet wound. Blood-stained branches, blood-stained leaves, and bloody dirt. I followed with my flashlight and it led me towards somewhere, an unknown landmark that I didn't know existed. It was the mouth of an abandoned mine shaft deep within the woods. That mine shaft, I lived here all my life but have never known it's here until the hunt led me to it. I flashed my light to the pitch-black entrance and saw droplets of blood on the ground. It leads deeper into the darkness where my light couldn't reach. Of course, I didn't enter the horrifying mine shaft that I discovered. I may have been drunk that time, but I already knew that I'm chasing after some monster. The monster that emptied a barn's worth of animals and took 2 bullets but managed to run away. No way I would enter its nest. I instead prepared the dynamites I had and planted them at the entrance, intending to blow it all, to close it up with debris of rocks. I ignited the dynamite and got some distance, then, boom! A large explosion at the entrance of the mine shaft. It blocked the entrance with rocks. What I just did, the creature didn't like it. From somewhere close by, it screamed. It screamed so loud that it knocked me back into my senses. It was louder than ever, clearer than ever, and closer than ever. The scream sounded like a choir of humans and pigs screeching from one throat. It was outworldly. The courage from fear had drained all of a sudden. It made me feel fear and paranoia that I should have felt earlier within the hunt. I backed off instinctively as I regretted my decision. Why the fuck would I chase after something that skins huge animals? I backed instinctively until I tripped and fell on my back, hard against a tree. A beehive hanging from the tree fell down on me. It must have lost its grip on the branch when my fall I shook the tree. Angry bees started coming out and I ran away from the swarm towards the open rain, exposed off of cover but free from angry insects. I tried to point my flashlight at the scream, but it won't open. The fall crushed my flashlight, leaving everywhere unseen under the blanket of darkness. In an unfortunate set of accidents, I've become a blinded prey out in the open. Then follows the sounds of sudden, sharp, and quick movements along the trees. The creature is angry and closing in, circulating around nearby. I felt its intense killing intention creeping along the trees, preparing to pounce on me. The sounds of its footsteps, branches being passed over, and bushes being rattled. Something out of this world is circling close here, something mad violent. I quickly grabbed my hunting rifle and aimed, and the noise, it made the sound stop. All those rushing and violent noises had immediately silenced. Quieted itself the moment I aimed, leaving only the sound of rain and thunder. It must have known that I had a chance of fighting back. The flavor of bullet wound earlier must have reminded it of what death tasted like. What the monster didn't know is that my gun had somehow broken as well, like my flashlight. I only realized it when I aimed. The cartridge is oozing with sticky honey from earlier accident, damaging the inside of my gun. I pulled the trigger and heard it click. Nonetheless, I aimed. Wherever it moves slightly, I will point my gun at it and it will stop. I'm acting for life or death, pretending to be dangerous. There was a long silence that felt like a standoff. It will move around me and I will follow its direction while pointing a broken gun at it. It was long until the tension was broken. Broken by the sound of leaves being stepped on. I aimed my gun at it. It was footsteps walking away, backing up from me. It then quickened its retreat. Then started running away from me. The sound of its footsteps becomes farther and quieter until I'm alone again. I've won. The creature wised up and decided to retreat. I ran as well. I ran as far as I could on the opposite direction. I ran until I see a familiar road. What just happened left me paralyzed. I dropped my rifle and sat down by a tree at the side of a concrete road, looking for comfort. I wanted to run back home already, but I didn't want to give away my location, not under pitch darkness. After waiting silently at the side of the road for hours, the sun started to rise, turning the sky into a shade of light blue. The rain slowly stopped, making a deafening quiet throughout the forest. The small presence of daylight gave me comfort and security. It was my cue to run along and go back, so I did. I ran as fast as I could, following the road back until I'm home. I kept looking at my sides as I run at the middle of the large concrete road, alert in case a monster happens to follow and show itself. Luckily it didn't. I made it back home safe. My ambush has ended. That is my story. My days became tame and I didn't get attacked anymore after that ambush. Maybe it's because I managed to lure it away, or maybe because I decided to only grow crops after that mess. No more animals to be found in here anymore. I didn't want to look after any kind of animals after that. When I got back from the ambush, it was traumatizing seeing the brutalized bodies of my dogs when I got back home. Milo's body, still sticking to the wall after the thing had slammed him there with great force. His guts splattered all over the wall. Biscuit's ravaged body on the floor, almost indistinguishable to a dog's corpse apart from some brown fur along with the mush of his flesh. Earlier when you showed me a picture of the creature, I was shocked. I barely saw its silhouette and you managed to get a clear photograph. Glad to know that it really was a monster. No human could have done something like that. I won't tag along on your mission to hunt it, but I'll gladly mark on your map where that abandoned mine shaft is. Here, somewhere on this part I've encircled. I hope you got what you needed. Bring a shovel if you're gonna dig your way in the mine after I closed it up with dynamites. And firearm knowing that it's vulnerable of taking a bullet. I'll advise against it though, hunt at your own risk. End of recording. I obtained the location of an unknown mine shaft on my map. This information is crucial for my future interest. My mission on this farm is over, his story is revealed. I now need to head to the other end of Jonestown to confront the second storyteller. My journey begins towards Jones Asylum. No one in my town remembers the past year. The morning I woke up to find my girlfriend Ava gone was like a splash of cold water to the face. At first, I thought she had left for an early shift at her job at the diner in downtown Eldridge, a sleepy little town that rarely saw anything more exciting than the annual fall fair. My phone was dead, which was odd because I could have sworn I plugged it in the night before. After rummaging through the drawers for a charger and giving it some juice, the date flashing on the screen made my heart stop. February 17th, 2024. That couldn't be right. Last night was February 16th, 2023. I stumbled out of bed, my heart racing as I dialed Ava's number, only to be greeted by the cold, impersonal tone of a disconnected line. The streets were just as confused and silent as I felt. Neighbors milled around, some in tears, others with a dazed look I probably mirrored. It wasn't just Ava, others were missing too. We're doing everything we can, the sheriff assured everyone at the press conference, his eyes hollow, reflecting a year of questions with no answers. The police investigation stirred up more confusion than clarity. The only common thread was the last thing anyone could recall, a thick, unnerving fog that had swallowed the town whole. Hours turned into days, and with each passing moment, the weight of our collective amnesia pressed heavier. Then the vision started. At first, I thought they were nightmares, fragments of a subconscious trying to make sense of the nonsensical. But when I overheard Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store whispering about the shadows she'd seen in her dreams, I realized these weren't just personal demons. Others were all seeing them as well. In the days that followed, a makeshift support group formed. We were a band of the bereaved, each of us missing a piece of our lives, desperately searching for answers in a town that had none to give. We met in the back room of Eldridge's library, a space generously offered by the librarian, Sarah, who was missing her husband and children. The meetings began as a way to share information, any leads that the police might have overlooked, but they quickly devolved into something much darker. It was during one of these gatherings, under the sterile buzz of fluorescent lights, that we first spoke of the visions. As the meetings unfolded, a shared narrative began to emerge, pieced together from the fragments of those gathered in the dimly lit back room. It was a story that seemed too bizarre, too otherworldly to be anything but the collective imaginings of a town gripped by loss and confusion. Yet, the details were too consistent, too vivid to dismiss outright. Every account converged on a single scene, a clearing in the woods, enveloped in a fog so dense it felt alive, almost sentient. None of us remembered how we got there, yet the place was eerily familiar, as if it had always been a part of the town's landscape, hidden in plain sight. And at the center of this clearing stood a large stone altar, ancient and worn, its origins lost to time. The memories were fragmented, like shards of glass reflecting pieces of a whole we couldn't quite grasp. But as we shared, the picture became clearer, and a chilling realization settled over us. We had all been there, standing in a circle around the altar, our hands joined in a pact we could scarcely comprehend. As the conversation spiraled deeper into the shared darkness of our memories, I found myself speaking without thought, my voice a stranger to my own ears. It was the only way, I heard myself say, the only way the fog would let the town go. The room fell into a hushed silence, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Then, from the back, the voice of my neighbor, Tom, cut through the quiet. "Can you still taste them?" Those 5 words were like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. A floodgate of memories opened, and with it came a rush of visceral, undeniable truth. I was back there, in the clearing, the fog caressing my skin with cold fingers. And there, in my hands, was flesh. Cooked human flesh. The horror of the realization was paralyzing, but even as my mind recoiled, my senses betrayed me. The taste, the texture, it was all there, horrifyingly vivid. As if watching through someone else's eyes, I saw myself take a bite, the act so barbaric yet so achingly familiar. And then I saw it, the remnants of a tattoo on the charred skin. The revelation hit me like a truck, sending me spiraling into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The words "Ava loves Hunter" inked on the charred forearm were unmistakable. My stomach revolted as I hunched over, the contents of my gut splattering onto the cold library floor. My world didn't just spin, it capsized, plunging me into a dark sea of guilt and disbelief. As I tried to catch my breath, gasping for air that suddenly felt too thick to breathe, Sarah's screams tore through the eerie silence of the library. Her cries, raw and filled with an agony that words couldn't possibly capture, echoed off the walls. She collapses into a heap on the floor, her body racked with sobs that seemed to shake the very foundation of the room. I ate them. My God, I ate my children.